Alrighty, let's get started. If you can't tell, I do have a new mic. I think it sounds a lot better than before, actually. I don't know too much about how different it sounds, but hopefully there's a noticeable improvement. So today we're going to be talking about Phobies in educational content. Um, and personally, I think it's a very difficult thing to focus on, but we're going to be talking about a bit about why and also content in general because I think that's an important thing to cover. So first off, let's talk about the two main types of phobies content. Um, it's mainly either gameplay, which focuses on real gameplay. It provides like real situations. I think for me, at least, educational content is usually a lot more theoretical. It's a lot more vague. Gameplay content focuses a lot more on actually playing the game, right? It mainly gives entertainment value, but I actually think that VOD reviews also count as gameplay content to some extent. Granted, I don't mean VOD reviews as in the YouTubers VOD reviewing, but more so you yourself reviewing them. I think that can be very useful. Educational content, of course, focuses a lot more on direct information or opinions and whatnot. And they're supposed to give you information about mechanics and strategies and whatnot. Um, I think YouTubers can tend to be categorized very easily, but I think a good example of a hybrid would be someone like Archie Chomp. So they do VOD reviews and they also stream gameplay with their live commentary. So it's a very good example of how you can employ some form of informational or educational content into your gameplay. Um, so I want to get in a bit into more what makes educational content difficult, and I think the main reason is that Phobies is very limiting on strategy. Um, to try to like explain in a succinct manner, essentially there's a lot of luck, right? What you have, what your opponent has, those two factors are wildly different. Your collection probably is a lot more different than other players. There can be exceptions, right? Because of the starter phobies pack, maybe you start out with like basically the exact same phobies as other people. But a lot of phobies in this game are very situational or they're outshined. So a lot of the time when you get a new phobia, it's like, oh, hey, I got a new phobia. Nothing crazy, not much you get from it because it doesn't really do that much that often. It'll have its time to shine, but ultimately it doesn't really have much value overall unless you get something really strong. Um, but you can't predict what you get. You have no agency over what you receive. You have no agency over what your opponent has. You can't see what counters they have for what you have. You can't really see what their collection is. You can check if they don't. You can check their level by searching up their name, but that's the extent. I have done that before to see if someone had snowball because on small maps, snowball is really dangerous because paired with like literally any one cost, it can one shot your murder wing, it can one shot your Jargan, though that barely happens, but it can one shot basically any squishy along with like a razor cat or something like that. Um, but Phobies is very special because being able to play every card in your collection is almost completely unprecedented. I don't think I've ever seen it before. So it makes it really difficult because there's no customization. Your customization is completely automatic, right? Your collection is special to you, but not in a good way, if that makes sense. Um, I've decided to mix the personal grievances point from last video with this specific like what makes educational content difficult because ultimately I think that's the reason it's difficult. It's because you have to be super vague with how you describe things. Like for example, I was watching a map guide by player himself. Um, Very basic, right? You just have to go like, oh, there's an obstacle here, and like it takes 2 turns to reach the panic point. And it's like, wow, that's crazy. I mean, like, what more can you really say? You can say like, oh, you can reach it with like a flying unit, but the thing is, you can't be specific. You can't be like, oh, you gotta use murder wing or something like that, because if you did, it wouldn't make some people wouldn't have it. And it's like, yeah, you can use starter phobies as a very good example, but ultimately, a lot of the time, starter phobies aren't really, um, you don't always want to use them. Obviously, I think that's a very obvious point. I don't know why I said it like it was like groundbreaking, but um, this is kind of just a repeat of the last slide to some extent. But I think a point that I want to make out here is that Phobies for a mobile game has a really high skill floor, but a really low skill ceiling, at least compared to non-mobile games. And it's like, yeah, Phobies is mainly a mobile game. That's what its interface was made for. Um, and I mean, it's touchscreen compatible. So yeah, it's definitely made to be mobile. But I think ultimately it's this in this really uncanny gray area that is really weird, and it makes it difficult to judge to some extent. Um, But basically, a lot of the factors you want to account for, like what phobies your opponent has, if they can counter yours, what you have, right? All of that is completely thrown out the window. Think of literally any other game that has any form of customization, and I think a big part of the game is figuring out what they have, what archetype they have, and how to counter it. Phobies doesn't have that. You have every archetype, you have every counter, unless you don't have them in your collection. So once we see like maxed out players like 1v1ing, I think that'll be a lot more interesting because then we'll get to see what's the strongest phobies when literally everyone is available, right? And I think I'm just gonna put this out there, probably the most generic phobies are gonna be the strongest, like the ones with the best stats, right? Because they're just gonna be really strong. I think poison is gonna be really good. Disease is kind of gonna suck because mechanicals are still really good, but poison is still pretty decent because poison isn't as big of a debuff as people think. So they tend to not really have that big of a downside in terms of stats compared to other units. Um, but yeah, I'm just putting that out there. But basically, Phobies has a lot of luck put into it, and it kind of sucks because I think sometimes the game just isn't winnable, and it's not even about like level differences anymore. It's just what you have and what your opponent has, and then what you don't have and what your opponent doesn't have. But yeah, that's about it. I'm still plan to finish the rest of the presentations. I just wanted to get this one out there. I wanted to focus on this one first because I got my new mic and I was like, oh yeah, sure, we'll test it out. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed. Have a good day. Oh, Valorant update. I haven't played Valorant. Wait, no, I did actually. I played Valorant yesterday. I haven't played today. It's like 11:50 right now. I don't want to play Valorant, so yeah.